confirmed. It's interesting about Pete Hegseth because he's the hardest one. That's going to be for them to get him, like, well, not the hardest. He's probably one of the only ones who have kind of like a chance of not getting confirmed, in my opinion, even though, newsflash, I'm not even going to make it a big thing. I think he is going to end up getting confirmed. We'll get to that specifically as well. But Pete Hegseth had his confirmation. It was very interesting to watch. We're going to watch some clips. We're going to talk about what's going to really happen. It was interesting because they were asking him questions. There was questions that were just complete BS, that were just questions that Democrats were asking him that made no sense for them to ask. There were layup questions from Republicans that obviously loved him. There were questions about him cheating on his wife. Like, it was a really interesting way. Like, it's TV. It was interesting TV, and it was a way to see how those meetings work, how, like, the Senate meetings, how they can talk about people, the questions that are being asked. So we're looking at all of that, and kind of just talk about what they're asking him, how much sense it makes, because some things were kind of going viral on Twitter being talked about. And yeah, it was Senate. It was Senate. So first, let's get to whether or not he'll be confirmed. And bear with me 1 second. Hold on, I'm going to play this. I got to blow my nose.
Well, Lauren had a lot in the
You were talking earlier about how Senator Warren has been very detailed in explaining her concerns. She put out a memo, a letter essentially, that's like footnoted and documented with references. So talk to us about what we learned from Warren's letter.
Well, Lauren had a lot in the letter that surrounded a lot of the allegations that have already been reported. But she is, to the points that others have made, she is also going to plan to talk about policy issues as well. Her letter to him was 33 pages. It was pretty extensive. She was really the only Democrat to send him this, sort of a preview of the homework that she did on him. So I expect that exchange, when the questions get to her, to be pretty important. I also want to add on to the conversation, too, that while they may talk about policy issues that Hegseth has hinted at his support of, I'm also wondering about some of the new news that has come up in the last week, like the president-elect's comments about Greenland and the Panama Canal. Is that something that Democrats also may ask Hegseth? Do you support this? How will you use military coercion to go into Greenland or take over the Panama Canal? That also will be interesting, too. I wouldn't expect, having been in front of Hegseth before when he was here talking to reporters, that he would deviate from anything that the president-elect has said. But it will be an interesting moment if he is called upon to defend some of those policies and thoughts that Trump has about how the military should be used.
Well, speaking of Donald Trump and his policies, the Washington Post will broadcast Trump's inauguration. That's next Monday. The inauguration of the 47th president will be live in the morning, and preparing for previewing Trump's swearing in. That'll happen midday Monday. It always happens on January 20th. This year it falls on Martin Luther King Day. We expect to see large crowds down in Washington, and you can watch all of the coverage with the Washington Post on our homepage. It's WashingtonPost.com, or you can find us on YouTube by looking for Washington Post. We see there the committee chair, Roger Wicker of Mississippi, and the top Democrat, Jack Reed of Rhode Island. Rhonda, this is the moment where we see the committee switch over and Republicans take control.
That's right. It just happens over the course of days, and usually the person who served as the ranking member will, if their party is in control, they will take over the chairmanship. But this committee is so interesting because it's not one of the...
All right, Senate. What do we got? We got Senate. Pete Hegseth makes a difference because he is the biggest. He was the only person that has a chance of not getting confirmed. There's talks about whether or not it was sexual assault. There's talks about what else? Him saying his comments on not wanting women in the army or thinking women shouldn't serve in combat roles, and that's kind of the main questions they were asking him during the confirmation hearing yesterday. So let's get to that. First we're going to start off kind of the news. I don't know what's happened afterwards with it, and is he going to get in or not? Let's see. When are Pam Bondi off? Okay, yeah, this is the one. Okay. So Basically, it does look like he's going to get confirmed, and this article says it. So we're going to just read a little bit of that so you guys can get an idea of this. Let's see. And this is a Newsweek article. Let me go back. All right, take this off. Take that off. So many ads, bro. It's just insane. All right. Let's see. While Republicans have a majority in the Senate, then the vote is narrow. Candidates can only afford to lose up to 2 of the Republican Senate votes before they fail the process, right? So that's basically saying, Donald Trump and the Republicans in the election, they just won the Senate, the House, they have all of Congress, and then the presidency. But they're saying the lead is very narrow, so he can only get 2 people that are Republicans, because you figure all the Democrats are going to say no, most of the Republicans, all the Republicans are going to say yes. He only has 2 that can say no for him to be able to win. So there's a lead, but it's very narrow. But Pete Hegseth, whose confirmation hearing was one of the first to be considered, faces an easier process after receiving the backing of Republican Senator Johnny Ernest, who is previously undecided. So after each nominee's confirmation hearing, committees vote on whether or not to recommend the nominee to the full Senate. So we have these confirmation hearings going on all day. It was Marco Rubio today. He's going to probably get confirmed. Most of them are going to get confirmed during this week when they have these meetings. I watched a little bit of Marco Rubio's. It was much more boring, right? Wasn't as entertaining to watch as Hegseth's. It was just the way they were really just the questions they were asking Hegseth. Some of them so stupid, some of them so good. How they were really pressing them, how they were insulting them, and then how the Republicans were so big on complimenting him and saying this guy is great. Just the process of it, seeing on how the Senate, how like you could see maybe Democrats and Republicans on the Senate side don't like each other, like that beef of how they're not together. You could see that in it. All that was very interesting. The Marco Rubio was much more business as usual. I watched it for about an hour or so. Because they're going to get mostly confirmed, right? So that's what's going on this week. The next thing you want to think about, right, is, okay, we have all these meetings. When were they actually going? Donald Trump is going in. He's being inaugurated on Sunday. When will his cabinet be in, right? And when will we find out if Pete Hegseth is, right? Because even though it looks like he is, we don't know. So this article kind of tells that as well. So after each confirmation hearing, committees vote on whether or not to recommend the nominee to the full Senate. Senators then debate the pick before a final vote with all 100 senators. A simple majority confirms whether or not they pass the chamber, right? So it's really easy. So the nominees confirmation hearing, committees vote on whether or not to recommend the nominee to the full Senate. So you got to get recommended to the full Senate after your hearing. Everyone has their own specific hearings with the specific parts of Senate or the different members. Then after that, you put it to the full Senate if you get to that with all 100 senators, and then that's just a simple vote, 50 over 50. You get the popular vote, you get it. The House of Representatives does not vote on appointments. Only the Senate approval is needed, so that's a big deal. So you only got to get two votes, basically. It usually takes between 1 and 2 weeks between clearing the committee and the full Senate votes. So once you clear the committee, get that committee vote, 2 to 3 weeks, then you go to the full Senate vote. For example, ahead of Trump's last term, Education Secretary pick Betsy DeVos cleared committee on January 31st and won the full Senate's approval on February 7th. So Pete Hegseth, I don't think he's cleared the Senate committee. I don't think he's cleared his committee's vote yet. There are 22 people requiring Senate confirmation before they can fill their positions in the first week of hearings. Has currently scheduled 13, meaning the whole process is unlikely to be completed before Trump's inauguration. The whole process won't be, but they're saying probably Pete Hegseth it look like. And we'll look into that as well. Now, let's just look at a couple of what the people are saying and just kind of a little bit of analysis of a few, and because they're just interesting. Like, let's see. All right. So let's go to this first older lady in red. All right. Let's see. Yeah, these are questions. So this first lady in red, let me go to her. I didn't think she did the best of job. She was asking just simple layup questions. So let's start with her. This is where I want to start with, and we're going to watch a couple people. Come on. Oh, is this her? Yep, I think so. All right.
Used to be real short.
Real short. Serious investment targeted at systems that we truly need from the Office of Secretary. It's more. Thank you.
My colleagues, I would ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter organized by a group called Flag Officers for America. which has 120 retired generals and admirals offering their support for Mr. Hegseth's nomination. I ask unanimous consent. Without objection, it is entered into the record. Senator Shaheen.
Good morning, Mr. Hegseth.
Good morning, Senator.
I was pleased when I was contacted on your behalf about meeting before this hearing. I've been on this committee since 2011, and during that time, I voted to confirm 6 nominees to be Secretary of Defense from 3 administrations, 2 Democratic and 1 Republican, the first Trump administration. Every one of those nominees met with me and my Democratic colleagues on this committee before the hearing. So, as you can imagine, I was disappointed when no one ever followed up. When we followed up with your office, you were not able to meet.
They talk about this throughout the whole thing. Apparently, he wasn't meeting with the Democrats beforehand, and apparently he wasn't meeting with meeting with Republicans beforehand, and you'll see the difference. And that's what's interesting about that is kind of just like it gives you an idea of what the plan for this guy is going to be, from a sense of, is it to work with them, to talk and have like a free flowing thing and in this like bipartisan thing, or is it going to be we're just going to do what we want and kind of and communicate with people as little as possible?
Do you understand that if you're confirmed to be Secretary of Defense, that you will have a responsibility to meet with all members of this committee, not just Republicans?
Senator, I very much appreciate and understand the traditionally bipartisan nature of this committee. Their national defense is not partisan. It should not be about Republicans or Democrats. And so I look forward to working together with you and your colleagues on priorities facing this nation. Yes.
I think we would expect that. And one reason that I wanted to meet with you was because I thought it would be really helpful to better understand your views on women in the military. Because you've made a number of surprising statements about women serving in the military.
All right, women in the military, he gets asked this all the time, but the way different people ask it is different. This lady, she asked him a lot of like softball questions in the way that aren't helping him, but what do you expect me to say softball questions? Like she asked him like obviously the bipartisan of his job of being the Secretary of Defense is like, yeah, you do got to communicate with both people. You're asking him like, hey, do you realize in this job you have to communicate with both people? That's an easy question, of course. What do you expect me to say? No, of course I know I have to communicate with people. And the way she starts wording these questions about how he feels about women in the military, there's some other like members that ask him in such a better way. We'll get to that, but she was asking him softballs.
As recently as November the 7th of 2024 on the Sean Ryan Show, you said, and I quote, "I'm straight up saying that we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective." The quote went on a little longer, but that was the gist of it. That was before you were nominated to be Secretary of Defense. Mr. Hegseth, do you know what percentage of our military is comprised of women?
I believe it's 18 to 20%, Senator.
It's almost 18%, and in fact, DOD's 2023 demographic report indicated that there are more women serving now, and there are fewer separations.
All right, so listen up.
So they make up a critical part of our military. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, ma'am. Women in our military, as I have said publicly, have and continue to make amazing contributions across all aspects of our battlefield.
Well, you also write in your book, The War on Warriors, with the chapter, The Deadly Obsession with Women Warriors, that, quote, "Not only are women comparatively less effective than men in combat roles, but they are more likely to be objectified by the enemy and their own nation in the moral realms of war." Mr. Hegseth, should we take it to believe that you believe that the 2 women on this committee who have served honorably and with distinction made our military less effective and less capable?
What is he to say to that other than that's not what I believe? He does a great job throughout this entire thing of slipping and sliding, but like dodging, I guess, all of some of the questions that are not for him and ignoring them or answering them in ways that he wants to. Keep in mind, this guy was a Fox newscaster, right? So he knows how to talk, and he was a Fox newscaster. He had to play the right role to the biggest of extremes. On the Sean Ryan Show, we've talked about the Sean Ryan Show on this show multiple times, right? let me see what does this look like. Okay, we've talked about the Sean Ryan show on here multiple times because it's just about kind of he had some things going on where he he was the first guy to get the note from the Vegas bomber, right, from the guy that blew the Tesla truck up, right, and he has a lot of like army type of news things. And then Pete Hegseth was on there basically saying crazy stuff, basically saying like what she's talking about with like where he's like, you know, when did the military become so woke? Women are not as good or not as effective, right? And that becomes a major question of this. But the way she asked the question, how else is he going to answer it other than the way he's about to answer it?
I'm incredibly grateful for the two women who've served our military in uniform and include.
And he's also been in the military before too. Keep that in mind.
Contributions on the battlefield. Indispensable contribution. Senator, I would like to clarify, when I'm talking about that issue, it's not about the capabilities of men and women, it's about standards. And this committee has talked a lot about standards. Standards that we, unfortunately, over time, have seen eroded in certain duty positions, certain schools, certain places, which affects readiness, which is what I care about the most, readiness on the battlefield. I appreciate that. And so my comments point time and time again to standards.
Your statements publicly.
Standards, right? And you'll see this keep going as well. It's not about whether you're a man or a woman. It's whether or not you can pass the tests that the physical requirements that you need to be in our military and to be in certain parts of our military. Like if you can do this, you can be in. And they're basically saying that some women, or not some women, they're just saying women on whole, that's what he's saying, are not, that's his argument. And that's the argument you're going to see for the Republicans with him, is that women are not on average able to do those things. But it's not about women as a whole. It's a standard thing. That's what he's saying. Now, he said some crazy things, and they're going to get to that. There's people who grill him way better. I mean, and when you first hear that, it's like, okay, it makes sense. Like, I couldn't pass a army physical readiness test, and I'm a man, like, whatever you, like, so and there's women that can, obviously. So I think that's where he's trying to get off, where it's like, I'm not meaning it as no woman should be. We just have a standard that is going on that is lowering the quality of people that are being led into our armed services. That's what his argument is. But the things that he says are different than that, and it's quite crazy, right? The things that he says and that they're quoting him on shows and books, it's quite different, and it's quite crazy than the perspective he's trying to put on here. We'll skip her because she doesn't ask the best questions. I just wanted to show how not good a question she asked.
Have not been to that effect. After your nomination, you did state to a group of reporters that you, quote, support all women serving in our military today who do a fantastic job across the globe, including combat. So what I'm confused about, Mr. Hegseth, is which is it? Why should women in our military, if you were the Secretary of Defense, believe that they would have a fair shot and an equal opportunity to rise through the ranks? If on the one hand, you say that women are not competent, they make our military less effective, and on the other hand, you say, oh no, now that I've been nominated to be the Secretary of Defense, I've changed my view on women in the military. What do you have to say to the almost 400,000 women who are serving today about your position on whether they should be capable to rise through the highest ranks of our military?
Senator, I would say I would be honored to have the opportunity to serve alongside you, shoulder to shoulder, men and women, black, white, all backgrounds, with a shared purpose. Our differences are not what define us. Our unity and our shared purpose is what define us, and you will be treated fairly and with dignity, honor, and respect, just like every man and woman.
There is a part in there to talk about kind of the things he does with him drinking and everything else. There is a part of him that is like, he's kind of smiling sometimes when the Democrats ask him questions. Like, you could kind of get the idea that he doesn't care. He knows he's going to get in. He knows how to answer these questions. Why it may seem like this is a big deal. Like, he kind of smiles a lot. You hear people like laugh, and they're usually laughing like at the Democratic senators, or like they're laughing on his side or on the Republican side, which is kind of interesting about this. Let's skip him. Now we're gonna go to this next guy. This is just to give you the first example of a Republican in the opposite of softball questions. Like, they love him. This guy loves Pete Hegseth, and look how they ask the questions.
Have served in combat in the last 25 years, to include women. I think that this line
Senator ethos. So without objection, it will be entered into merit war. They support Mr. Hegseth and comment on his focus on merit warfighting.
And this guy's talking about there's a bunch of letters that were sent in from women, colonels, military veterans of different types, to the level of colonel, that were basically saying, hey, this guy's a great man. So they were putting those letters in as well. They're basically just like of his character letters, just saying he's a good guy.
Fighting readiness, military training status, and the warrior ethos. So without objection, it will be entered into the record. And now I'm honored to recognize Senator Cotton for 7 minutes.
Mr. Hegseth, let's continue on this line of questioning about what's sometimes referred to as women in combat. I think that phrase is something of a misnomer. Many members of this
Also interesting to me, bro, how old girl, as soon as she stopped asking her questions, she walked away. If you peep that, like, yeah, she's fried. She's fried.
committee have served in combat in the last 25 years, to include women and men. I'm sure all those men served with women, whether they were military police officers or they were pilots or whether they were intelligence analysts or medics or what have you. You served. I assume you served with women who were on the front lines as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And were those women anything other than skilled, brave, and honorable in their service?
They were some of the best soldiers I worked with.
So women have been serving in combat for a long time. Women have even been serving in combat units like infantry battalions for a long time in roles like medics or mechanics or what have you. So what we're talking about here specifically is women in ground combat roles in jobs like infantrymen or artillerymen or special forces. Until about 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. Under Secretary Panetta, those roles were opened up to women to serve in. Has President Trump...
Their argument, combat roles. We're not talking about women. This is their argument. This is the argument that they're trying to lean on heavily, is that he's not talking about women in the military as a whole, because there's so many different jobs and occupations that you can have in the military. He's talking about women in combat roles where you have to have this top physical performance that you could have as a human being. That's what they're wanting, right? And they're saying that's what he's saying. We need to make sure in this country we have that. And when you hear that, you think that's all good, but then you got to keep in mind that conversation of, A, what has he been on camera saying, and what is he like publishing books saying? That is like way more fried than that, or he's describing himself terribly as someone that was like a Fox host journalist and that plans on being the defense secretary. That's the other side of that. Like it's a coin. This guy is painting it, obviously. He loves Pete Hegseth, and he's leaning on heavily onto that thought process of just clarifying that he doesn't mean women in the military. He means the women in the military that are in combat positions.
Trump indicated at all that he plans to rescind or alter that guidance?
You're correct to point out, Senator, that these are the decisions that the Commander-in-Chief will have the prerogative to make. He has not indicated to me that he has plans to change whether or not women would have access to these roles. However,
and he's saying, you're saying, first off, it's not even me that would have this job. Why you guys are asking me these questions? I wouldn't be able to say whether or not women are able to be in combat roles. That'd be up to Trump. Why don't you ask him? And he does that kind of thing, again, dodging. Another question would be that on the other side of that is, well, yeah, that's maybe true, but you're the defense secretary. This is your job to be around these things. This is your job to maybe give Trump advice to go back and forth. How do you feel? And how you feel could be connected to the guy that's trying to get you the job. So it's a coin. This is very interesting. He's going to get confirmed, but this whole thing goes on like what type of person this guy is and what his goal will be to do with the military specifically. And then again, will it help the military? What will his goals as a military, as the defense secretary, what will those lead to as far as the country and the safety of Americans? That would be the first thing I think you would want to worry about with this.
However, I would point out, ensuring that standards are equal and high is of importance to him and great importance to me. Because
Standards
in those ground combat roles, what is true is that the weight of the ruck on your back doesn't change. The weight of the 155 round that you have to carry doesn't change. The weight of the 240 Bravo machine gun you might have to carry doesn't change. And so whether it's a man or a woman, they have to meet the same high standards. And Senator, in any place where those things have been eroded,
keep in mind he gave him,
or in courses, criteria have been changed in
an
order to meet quotas, racial quotas or gender quotas, that is putting a focus on something other than readiness, standards, meritocracy, and lethality. So that's the kind of review I'm talking about, not whether women.
Now, DEI, I think it's always important to say this because DEI gets mixed in with so many other different things. DEI was created because it's not about letting black people, black men or women into positions just because they're black. It's letting black men and women who are qualified into the position, giving them the opportunity to work that position and not giving it to your white cousin, your white brother, your white daughter, son, or even worse, which happens, is just the white person that's as qualified as the black person because you're white and you want to give it to the white person, right? DEI was just created for that reason, so it's always important to remember that. But he's saying that we shouldn't have anything that's going away from quality, and I guess on its face value, you should believe that. Yeah, we shouldn't let a black person into the military that can't do the physical requirements, but we also shouldn't have people who decide who gets into the military. Let me not make it this a DEI conversation, but you get the point I'm trying to say, and if you don't, look something up.
Men have access to ground combat.
Okay, so thank you. So you expect no change to that guidance, but as you point out, in these specific jobs, there are irreducible physical demands. We expect our intelligence analysts and our mechanics to be physically fit in the military, but it's different when you're in the infantry or the artillery. You just mentioned a few things. Let me point it out. An artillery shell weighs almost 100 pounds. An Abrams tank round weighs around 50 pounds. The M240 Bravo machine gun with its tripod weighs almost 50 pounds. The average weight of a full kit, ammo, water, commo, body armor for a soldier is over 100 pounds. Nothing you can do can change any of those things, right? That is physical reality.
Go ahead. Yes, Senator. And I would say the requirements to handle those things in a ground combat unit, as far as standards, can look different than those of a medic or a drone pilot. And so it's not that it has to be the same standard throughout. It's standards to maximize efficacy.
You have to be able to carry the 100-pound. Forget what he said. You have to be able to carry the 50-pound truck on your. Like I have a friend in the Army that I'm thinking about that 1,000% would. I feel like love and agree with everything that they're saying. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing right or wrong with that. But he that was in the Army that would agree with this. And again, I agree with this on its face value. But this next lady that we're gonna show two more questions, and then you guys are gonna get an idea of the back and forth of how the Republicans ask the softballs and how the Democrats ask the hard questions. And what do you think about? You can make your own decision on the validity of both sides. You can make your own decisions on how you feel about that. I can say the Democratic lady, I think it's pretty fair to ask some pretty softball questions if you're trying to grill them, because they ask them, do you care about women? Of course I do. He's asking them, this guy's doing a good job, if you're a Republican, of like really painting that picture of we are only talking about the ability for you to be able to do the job in the Army that you're wanting to do. You should not be doing this job just because you're a woman. And it's hard to argue with that, but it's also a very fair argument to make. And I keep saying this, I'm beating a dead horse here, so maybe I should just let it go. The argument is to be made is this all this guy is saying, and how does he mentally feel? I think this next lady asks these questions very well.
Of that particular position.
Let me read a quote here from one Army officer. While it may be difficult for a 120-pound woman to lift or drag 250 pounds, the Army cannot artificially absolve women of that responsibility. It may still exist on the battlefield. The entire purpose of creating a gender-neutral test was to acknowledge the reality that each job has objective physical standards to which all soldiers should be held, regardless of gender. The intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. I assume, based on your testimony, you agree with that Army officer?
Absolutely. The standards need to be the same, and they need to be high, and they need to be set by the people closest to the problem set, closest to the understanding of what is required by that job. Commanders, commanding officers, and COCOMs and elsewhere who understand the reality of what they face, that's the feedback we should get. That's what should be enshrined and enforced, and no other set of political prerogatives. When I talk about removing politics, ideological or political prerogatives should contribute to those determinations. Nothing other than the execution of the mission.
Thank you. For the record, that Army officer was Captain Kristen Griest, the Army's first female infantry officer and one of its first female Ranger School graduates. One final point, you said they need to be objective, gender neutral, and high.
Like he's saying,
That's because
even the first woman is saying these things. It's about, and I think even women in the Army would feel the same way too. Women in the Army that can physically, because this isn't like a question of like, can women even do this? Of course they can. There's women in the Army that can that are able to meet these physical requirements, and the women in the Army who can would probably agree that, yeah, we shouldn't let anybody in here who can. I wouldn't want a woman in here that can't do these physical requirements. So let's skip this guy because this point is strong, and at first I was kind of like, okay, until you start hearing like what the other people say when they like bring up the questions about like, start bringing up the questions about like what he said, how he is, what is moral, like morally, how does he feel about these things? Because that's gonna be the real thing. He moves out of those questions good, but they're a little harder. But we're gonna skip this guy. He keeps asking these easy questions. The guy's smiling. They go out to dinner together. They're friends. We don't need to see much more of this. You guys get the point. Let's get to this. Okay. She does a good job. It's clearly a Democratic lady, does not want him in. I'm sure she'll probably be voting against him, so let's see what she says.
I ask unanimous consent to offer to the record a letter submitted by Omar Abbasi, son of former city council president of Samarra, Iraq, who worked with Mr. Hegseth in Iraq. Without objection, that will be entered. Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I do want to thank you for your service, I want to thank you for your willingness to serve in this capacity.
And keep in mind, this old girl came right back. Like, she definitely did not want to hear this guy talk. She did not want to hear this guy talk. She came back as soon as her dog started talking. That was interesting to me. A little disrespectful.
Thank you, Senator.
I have many concerns about your record, and particularly your public statements, because they are so hurtful to the men and women who are currently serving in the U.S. military, harmful to morale, harmful to good order and discipline. If you are saying that women shouldn't be serving in the military, and I'm going to read you your quotes, because the quotes themselves are terrible. You will have to change how you see women to do this job well, and I don't know if you are capable of that. So I want to press on these issues that my colleague Jean Shaheen brought up, because she said it so well. So first,
she's well spoken, and of course it's her colleague. I do not agree with that she said it so well. I do not agree with that.
First of all, you answered your questionnaire. Do you believe that any American who wants to serve in their country in the military and can meet objective standards set by the military should be allowed to serve without limitation? You've said yes to that question. But then in all of these other circumstances, you've denigrated active duty service members. We have hundreds of women who are currently in the infantry, lethal members of our military serving in the infantry, but you degrade them. You say, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. So specific to Senator Cotton's question, because Senator Cotton was giving you layups to differentiate between different types of combat. And specifically, as Secretary, would you take any action to reinstitute the combat arms exclusion for female service members, knowing full well you have hundreds of women doing that job right now? And the standards, your 2 mile run, Tom, is about the Army Combat Fitness Test. It is not the requirements to have an MOS 11 Bravo, which is the infantry. These are the requirements today for people serving in the industry, men and women. They are gender neutral, and they are very difficult to meet. They have not been reduced in any way, and our combat units, our infantry is lethal. So please explain specifically, because you will be in charge of 3 million personnel. It is a big job. And when you make these public statements, and I get you were not Secretary of Defense then, I get you were on TV, I get you were helping veterans, I get it was a different job. But most recently, you said this in November of 2024, knowing full well you might have been named as Secretary of Defense. So please explain these types of statements, because they're brutal and they're mean and they disrespect men and women who are willing to die for this country.
Well, Senator, I appreciate your comments, and I would point out I have never disparaged women serving in the military. I respect every single female service member that has put on the uniform, past and present. My critiques, Senator, recently and in the past, and from personal experience, have been instances where I've seen standards lowered, and you mentioned 11 Alpha, 11 Bravo, MOS, places in units, and the book that has been referenced multiple times here, The War on Warriors. I spent months talking to active duty service members, men and women, low ranks, high ranks, combat arms and not combat arms. And what each and every one of them told me, and which personal instances have shown me, is that in ways direct, indirect, overt, and subtle, standards have been changed inside infantry training units, ranger school, infantry battalions, to ensure that
Give
commanders
me one example. Please give me an example. I get you're making these
Commanders-
generalized.
He's saying, yeah, you guys are referencing this book that I wrote where I said women shouldn't be in combat roles, but I talk to people. I have my own experience because I've served in the military, and I've talked to people in the military, men and women, who said that there is something going on where we are allowing people, this is his opinion, whether they be women, whether they be people of color, to come into the military, and they, just because of those things, to meet requirements, but they may not necessarily meet the physical requirements, which are the most important. No one's going to argue that. Can you do the job, especially if you're being in the military? We are letting people in that can't meet the physical requirements into high-ranking military roles. She's saying, stand on business. I need an example of when you're saying that.
Meet quotas to have a certain number of female infantry officers or infantry enlisted, and that.
This is getting into that thing of quotas. We're thinking more of quotas to look good, more of getting people that are qualified into the military. That's what he's saying. She's saying this is not true. The women that are in it right now are qualified, and you're bringing up something, a problem that's not a problem. What is going on? What is the exact example of when you have talked to someone, right? When's the exact example of when you've talked to someone that is in the military that said, yeah, I'm looking around here, and they're just letting anybody in because she's a woman, he's black, she's a black woman, so she gets a double whammy. They're just letting them in, but they can't run a 2-minute mile, and they can't carry the 100-pound thing. She's asking him, can you tell me that story? When did you hear that? He's saying that he knows about quotas.
That disparages those women.
Commanders do
incredibly
not have to
capable
be
of meeting
quotas
that
for the infantry.
standard.
Commanders do not have to have a quota for women in the infantry. That does not exist. It does not exist. And your statements are creating the impression that these exist, because they do not. There are not quotas. We want the most lethal force. But I'm telling you, having been here for 15 years, listening to testimony about men and women in combat and the type of operations that were successful in Afghanistan and in Iraq, women were essential for many of those units. When Ranger units went in to find where the terrorists hiding in Afghanistan or in Iraq, if they had a woman in the unit, they could go in, talk to the women in a village, say, where are the terrorists hiding? Where are the weapons hiding? And get crucial information to make sure that we can win that battle. So you cannot denigrate women in general, and your statements do that. We don't want women in the military, especially in combat. What a terrible statement. So please, do not deny that you've made those statements. You have. We take the responsibility of standards very seriously, and we will work with you. I'm equally distressed you would not meet with me before this hearing. We could have covered all of this before you came here, so I could get to the 15 other questions that I want to get to. So women you have denigrated. You have also denigrated members of the LGBTQ community. Did you know that when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in place, we lost so many crucial personnel, over 1,000 in mission-critical areas. We lost 10% of all our foreign language speakers because of a political policy. You said in your statement, you don't want politics in the DOD. Everything you've said in these public statements is politics. I don't want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal.
Like, she hasn't really asked a question, right? But she's getting in, like, to those conversations, like, on his comments. She's bringing up specifics. She's asking for specific of him. She's giving for specifics. Like, I didn't know he had the conversation where he said, what Broski say? Where he said, damn. She just said it. I just lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. We don't want women in the military, especially in combat roles. So he's saying we don't want them in the military at all. We definitely more so don't want them in combat roles.
I mean, you're basically saying women, after they have children, can't ever serve in the military in a combat role. It's a silly thing to say. It's a silly thing to say, beneath the position that you are aspiring to. To denigrate LGBTQ service members is a mistake. If you are a sharpshooter, you're as lethal regardless of what your gender identity is, regardless of who you love. So please know this to be a true statement. So you say it was a political thing. You say it undermined us, social engineering. I don't know why someone having to publicly say or not publicly say who they love is social engineering. I think having that policy in the first place was highly problematic. And as you said in your statement, do you agree anybody should be able to serve in the military if they meet the standards?
Senator, as the president has stated, I don't disagree with the overturn of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Great, because I don't want you thinking, can't serve if you're a mom, can't serve if you're LGBTQ, and then last, can't serve if you're a leftist. The statements you said about people who have views differently than you, that we're the enemy, are you saying that 50% of the DOD, if they hold liberal views or leftist views or are Democrats, are not welcome in the military? Are you saying that?
Senator, I volunteered to deploy to Afghanistan under Democrat President Barack Obama. I also volunteered to guard the inauguration of Joe Biden, but was denied the opportunity to serve because I was identified as an extremist by my own unit for a Christian tattoo.
Thank you very much. Senator Gillibrand, you held up a document and referred to it during your questioning. Would you like that entered into the record?
We'll watch this last week and then we'll be done. And then he's talking about the tattoo. They talk about that later in this one, someone else asking. The tattoo, so we talked about this a couple months on stream back when I was streaming on YouTube, right? The question with me, is it like one of those things like the don't tread on me flag? Like, is it one of those things where you have that, and if you know the history on it, you're probably like a lot of times saying you like probably are kind of racist, but you can like stand on like a thing where it doesn't mean that, or like having a Confederate flag? Or is it like one of those things where people are being too leftist and it really is moving? People are being too leftist and they really are trying to like make this guy seem like he's someone he's not. I remember it being kind of like the don't tread on me. Like if I walk into somebody's house and I see a don't tread on me flag, or I see a Confederate flag, I'm probably not going to be, I'm not going to feel the most comfortable. Don't tread on me flag, meaning, let's see. The don't tread on me flag, also known as the Gadsden flag, symbolizes resistance and defiance against oppression. It conveys the idea that people have the right to self-determination and should not be subjected to unjust authority. Yeah, Okay. So it can mean a lot of different things, and people can probably, because I have seen it used for people that are real far right kind of hillbillies. I'll just be upfront, like a hillbilly thing, kind of like the Confederate flag, in my opinion. That's basically what they're asking, if that tattoo is one of those things where it's like it's a dog whistle. There's a question of that. I don't know. I remember reading about it. I have to look into it again. From what I remember, it does seem like it was a little bit of a dog whistle, but who knows? And then he's asking if that thing she put where it's like the actual rules of getting in and like being in a combat role, she had the actual rules printed out. He's asking, it seems like he's the guy taking in like everybody's statements and everybody's like proof and like putting them into the like he's keeping track of it and putting it into like the cabinet, like keeping it in storage for it to be saved, right? Like put it in the PFD document so you don't have to forget about it, automatic save. He's keeping all that stuff together.
Admitted at the point of your question, and I would like to enter into the record at this point a letter of support.
Yeah, enter it into the record.
Air Force Colonel Melissa Cunningham. Colonel Cunningham supports Mr. Hegseth and mentions his warrior ethos, combat effectiveness, and maintaining military training standards. So without objection, both of those will be admitted, and I now recognize Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, good morning. I'd like to thank you for your service to our nation in uniform and also your work on behalf of your fellow veterans and for your willingness to enter into this maelstrom of public service. I think the presence of so many veterans who have showed up to support you speaks volumes.
We're gonna skip him too.
I also want to recognize your family service and
What's
sacrifice.
this last question?
You know as well as anyone that it's not just the man that enters the arena, but it's the entire family who also works their way through this process as well. I appreciated our meeting with you and with your wife Jennifer this last month.
Okay, if you met with him, we know he's Republican, probably likes him. We're gonna move on because this isn't the lady. We're gonna go on to the next. Let's see. Let's give the guy his respect. Let's let him ask a question.
I thought that we had an excellent conversation, and I appreciate your statement and your answers to the advanced policy questions, especially your desire to bring a renewed focus on warfighting and lethality back to the Pentagon. I also respect and I appreciate my friend and colleague, Senator Gillibrand, and some of her.
Bro, this is a long glaze, bro. Like, I get you got to give the respect, but Jesus, this is a long glaze.
On very briefly, were there any other responses that you would like to make or clarifications that you would like to make before I move on to my questions?
Senator, thank you very much for the opportunity to meet and for the question. I would also acknowledge you were mentioning female engagement teams, which have shown a great deal of success on the battlefield. It would be and universally acknowledged as such. I've been in Iraqi homes where the language and gender barrier was real, and the ability to have someone there to help in that process would be a massive accelerant in mission success.
There is jobs where women can be better.
I recognize that reality. I also recognize that female engagement teams assigned to a SEAL team or a Green Beret team meet different standards also, which is okay because of the duty positions involved in that job. As far as politics, Senator, it has been the joy of my life to lead men and women in military outfits. When you're in combat or in training, there's a lot of conversations that happen. And you start to realize that a lot of people you're serving with share your political ideals or they don't. You find out there's Republicans, there's Democrats, there's Libertarians, there's Independents, there's Vegetarians, everything in between. None of that matters. It never mattered in how I led men and women, how I interacted with them, what missions we undertook. Politics has nothing to do with the battlefield, which is why President Trump has asked me to say, let's make sure all of that comes out. This is about warfighting capability, setting standards high, and making sure we give our boys, our men and women, everything they need to be successful on the battlefield.
There he's like, let's give our men, let's
Politics
give
can
our
play no
boys,
part
bro.
in that.
All right, so up to here, the insults of my dog have been just mostly about how he feels about women. This next woman gets into the next senator gets into like his sexual assault things, which are interesting because I think those questions, you know, they should be asked. We're gonna skip through these. We're gonna skip through these guys because these are the first people to bring up the like sexual assault. Should he morally even have this job? Can he lead the amount of people that it takes to have this job? So let's watch a little bit of that, and then we're gonna get out of here. It's always interesting when people laugh. Let's see that.
Any experience?
175,000, sir.
This.
And the Navy is 425, sir.
Well, it's 337 this year. How many in the Marine Corps?
175,000, sir.
172,300. Those numbers dwarf any experience you had by many multiples. I don't believe that you can tell this committee or the people of America that you are qualified to lead them. I would support you as the spokesperson for the Pentagon. I don't dispute your communication skills, but I believe that we are entitled to the facts here. I've asked for more documents. I assume you'd be willing to submit to an expanded FBI background check that interviews your colleagues, accountants, ex-wives, former spouses, sexual assault survivors, and others, and enable them to come forward.
Senator, I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
But you would submit to it.
I do not want to submit. Probably Trump would be the leader of that. He's not going to let that happen to me. I do not, and it's not my job. I'm not gonna answer that question because I don't have to answer that question.
Support it.
I don't do it.
I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
Thank you.
ask somebody else. Ask my supervisor.
At this point, I want to submit a letter from Captain Wade.
Yeah, I just skipped through that because I wanted to see what they were laughing at. Probably laughing because he's asking him numbers and he's getting very close estimates to the numbers. He's being a little bit of a dickhead for that reason. Let's get to the lady asking about the sexual assault and asking about like all the other stuff. He asked some questions there about whether or not he's fit to run it as far as the amount of people that he would be in charge of and if he's ever done something like that before. He's saying no. The senator saying no.
And in his letter, Mr. Lucas, directing the Iowa Guard, who to enter.
You're recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter submitted by Mr. Mark Lucas, who is a fellow Iowan. And
come on, let's get to it. I don't want to skip her. This lady, she asked, she was on.
Able to get changes made to the Uniform Code of Military Justice to make sure that we have improvements and on how we address the tragic and life-altering issues of rape, sexual assault. It will demand time and attention from the Pentagon under your watch if you are confirmed. So as Secretary of Defense, will you appoint a senior level official dedicated to sexual assault prevention and response?
Senator, as we have discussed, yes, I will.
Okay, and my time has expired. Thank you for your answers.
He said, as we have discussed,
Thank
yes,
you,
I
Mr.
will.
Chairman.
He's snarky, he's funny.
Mr. Hegseth, welcome.
Thank you.
I am focused on your fitness to serve, including your character and temperament and your overall qualifications to do the job. And I do appreciate the comments of Ranking Member Reed with his concerns regarding your nomination because I share those concerns. As part of my responsibility as a member of this committee to ensure the fitness of all nominees to come before any of the committees on which I sit, I ask the following 2 initial questions. First, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced...
So she's trying to get him caught up for when stuff maybe comes out in the years or in the months. That video proof that, hey, have you ever, basically, have you ever asked anyone for sex or tried to force someone to have sex with you? He said no. All right.
discipline or entered into a settlement?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
Senator, I was falsely accused in October of 2017. It was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared.
I don't think completely cleared is accurate, but the fact is that your own lawyer said that you entered into an NDA and paid a person who accused you of raping her a sum of money to make sure that she did not file a complaint. Moving on. As Secretary...
This is getting into, like, this is the guy that's going to be the Secretary of Defense. Some people could say, like, what does this have to do with his ability to lead that many people, his qualifications to do that job based on the fact that he served in the military, blase, blase. Some people would say, is this the type of guy with these type of morals that we want running the military? I mean, people talk about sexual assault that happens in the military being terrible, of the mistreatment of certain people of color in the military. Do you want a guy that's morally like this leading it all? And then there's also the conversation of, this is just wrong. If he's doing these things, he shouldn't be nowhere near the defense secretary. He should be maybe potentially going to jail. Those are the two sides of the coin with the sexual assault piece of him being, with him having sexual assault charges and potentially paying money to someone to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, to basically not talk.
You will be in charge of maintaining good order and discipline by enforcing the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ. In addition to the sexual assault allegations, and by the way, the answer to my second question should have been yes.
Yes.
I have read multiple reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, Those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports peddled by NBC
Do you
News
know that
run directly
drinking on the job
contradictory to
is
the dozens of men and women at
not
Fox News
contemplated
Channel
on it?
who I work with
I'm
who
not
came
hearing
on
the
the
answer to my
record
question.
and said they've
In your
never
opening
seen
statement,
that.
Mr. Hegseth, you commit to holding leaders accountable at all levels. That includes you, of course. And frankly, as Secretary, you will be on the job 24/7. You recently promised some of my Republican colleagues that you stopped drinking and won't drink if confirmed, correct?
Absolutely.
Will you resign as Secretary of Defense if you drink on the job, which is a 24/7 position?
I've made this commitment on behalf of
Will
the
you
men and women I'm
resign
serving.
as Secretary of Defense
I've
if
made this
you
commitment
drink
on
on the
behalf of
job?
the men and women I'm serving
I'm not
because it's the
hearing-
most important deployment
I'm not
of my
hearing an
life.
answer to my question, so I'm going to move on. While you have made
She does not like him at all. She's trying to really get to the point across of like, who is this guy that we're trying to make the defense secretary of our country? Yeah, you can say clearly doesn't like him, asking him hard questions and asking him questions to get him caught up. If it's proven or shown that you would drink on the job, which is a 24/7 job because protecting our country is a 24/7 job. If you drink on the job, will you resign? He's saying, I've already said I'm not going to drink on the job. I'm not even answering that question. And I'm not going to come out and say that I'm going to resign from my awesome job if I get caught drinking. That's what he said.
that commitment, you will not commit to resigning if you
And she's basically asking, are you going to stop drinking, period?
drink on the job. As Secretary of Defense, you will swear an oath to the Constitution and not an oath to any man, woman, or president, correct?
Correct.
Senator,
Yeah.
on multiple occasions, including as a
course.
young second lieutenant, I have sworn an oath to the
Answer is
Constitution,
yes.
and I'm proud to do so. Yes, ma'am.
In June of 2020, then President Trump directed former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper to shoot protesters in the legs in downtown D.C., an order Secretary Esper refused
This is
to
interesting.
comply with. Would you carry out such an order from President Trump?
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard unit that was in Lafayette Square during those
Would you
events,
carry
holding
out
a
an
riot
order to
shield on
shoot
behalf of my
protesters
country.
in the legs?
I saw 50
as
Secret
directed
Service agents
to
get injured
Secretary
by
Esper?
rioters trying to jump over the fence, set
Again,
the church on fire, and destroy
You know
a
what, that
statue.
sounds
He's a believer of he's saying yes, and she's going to go in and say that. This is a good question that she just asked him because he explained himself. Like, Trump said during the, let's go back. This was,
me
Rioters
in
was in
to comply with. Would you carry an order 2020?
and I have sworn an oath to the
Answer is
Constitution,
yes.
and I'm proud to do so. Yes, ma'am.
In June of 2020, then President Trump directed former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper to shoot protesters in the legs in downtown D.C., an order Secretary Esper refused to comply with. Would you carry out such an order from
2020, let's see, 2020 protest, George Floyd. I wanted to be sure. Basically, protests in Washington, D.C. for George Floyd. Trump was telling the then Secretary of Defense to shoot him in the leg, and he refused. He's saying, she asked, this is a good question because it's putting a specific instance of what happened to the last Secretary of Defense and asking them, what would you do in this position? It's very a good parallel because it's kind of similar to when they were asking J.D. Vance when he was vice president, when January 6th happened, how, Trump was trying to put all this pressure on Pence, and you feel however you feel about that, but Pence said, I'm not doing this. They were asking J.D. Vance, would you do this? This is a good one. And he shows what he's going to do. He says, hey, he comes from this place a lot, from the fact that he talks to a lot of people in military positions and police positions and positions of protection for Americans, whether it be in America as police officers or detectives and things like that, or outside of country lines as a military member. He talks to these people, and he sympathizes with them very clearly. You could see that. And he's saying, I heard that that protesters were rioting and that they were hurting these people there and they had to protect themselves. He's not saying yes or no, but he's basically saying yes. And he's also saying, with a lot of people of Trump's picks, is he going to stand up against Trump? But the whole point of all of Trump's cabinet picks is for them to not do that. It's not a question. It was a question, I guess, if you're qualified, yes. But the biggest question is, were you going to disagree with me? He proves right here in this, I'm not going to disagree with Trump. And I agree with Trump with this specific example that you just gave me.
from President Trump?
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard unit that was in Lafayette Square during those
Would you
events,
carry
holding
out
a
an
riot
order to
shield on
shoot
behalf of my
protesters
country.
in the legs?
I saw 50
as
Secret
directed
Service agents
to
get injured by
Secretary Esper?
rioters trying to jump over the fence, set
Again,
the church on fire, and destroy
You know
a
what?
statue.
That sounds to me that you will
Chaos.
comply with such an order. You will shoot protesters in the leg. Moving on.
Now, in his opinion, they're not protesters; they're rioters, and that's a conversation you see, whatever your social media, you see it on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, your friend's house, or when you're going out to the bar. Maybe if your friends all agree with you, you don't see it at your friend's house, but you'll see that thing of like, are these rioters that are terrible people and breaking the law, and they deserve to be shot in the leg? F them. Or are these protesters that are wanting the change in the country and are wanting to put their voice and use their constitutional right to make their voice heard and come together peacefully? And do they deserve to be shot in the leg? Like this is a balance that you hear about all the time, and this could be something when in America, when something happens at least once or twice a year where people want to protest, how do these things get handled? What's going on? That is a big hot button topic. And with the defense secretary, the power that he has, what is his mind going to be leaning towards? And he pretty much did say yes. But again, this is interesting because it gets to that thing that he's doing. Her questions and their interaction is a good example of how he's able to slip through. He's obviously well-spoken. And again, he obviously I think he's very confident that he's going to get confirmed, and I think he will get confirmed. So I don't think he's letting any of this stuff bother him too much. I think he was very prepared emotionally for what the questions they were going to ask him.
President-elect has attacked our allies in recent weeks, refusing to rule out using military force to take over Greenland and the Panama Canal, and threatening to make Canada the 51st state. Would you carry out an order from President Trump to seize Greenland, a territory of our NATO ally Denmark, by force, or would you comply with an order to take over the Panama Canal?
Senator, I will emphasize that President Trump received 77 million votes to be the lawful commander-in-chief of this country.
We're not talking about the election. My question is, would you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally?
We talked about this at the beginning of the episode. We talked about this in the stream a couple days ago. We're going to be talking about this next week when Trump's inaugurated. He's trying to take over Greenland because he's saying it's for the safety of America and for defense purposes because where its location is. He's trying to take over Canada. He's trying to take over and make it the 51st state. She's saying where you agree with these things. It's a hot button topic of what's going on. Again, she's doing and asking very specific questions, which I like. Very specific questions connected to a lot of the worries about whether or not how he feels about women in the military, his sexual assault, his morality. She's connecting these questions to very specific. She's connecting these like worries and thoughts and major things with him to very specific questions and instances in general and for what's going on right now, which is why I think she might have had one of the best questioning of this particular Senate confirmation hearing.
Of Denmark.
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never in this public forum give one way or another direct what orders the president would give me in any context.
That sounds to me that you would contemplate carrying out such an order to basically invade Greenland and take over the Panama Canal.
That's why Trump picked him.
Current DOD policy allows over the Panama.
Throughout this, I was looking at them too. Like I can't tell how they if they think this is all bullshit what they're asking them and they're on Hegseth's team, or like they favor Hegseth, or if they're like on the Democrats team. Like it's kind of with their facial expressions because like how she looks over.
Canal.
She definitely is with Hegseth. You could just she's like, oh, this is bullshit. Is she looking at her? Her face is stone cold, but she laughs sometimes. But she laughs more for the Republican side. But this is
current DOD policy allows service members and eligible dependents to be reimbursed for travel associated with non-covered reproductive health care, including abortions. Will you maintain this common sense policy?
Senator, I've always been personally pro-life. I know President Trump has as well, and we will review all policies.
Obviously.
But our standard is whatever the president wants on this particular issue. With my advice, I will take a look at.
If the president tells you that this common sense policy will not be maintained, you will not enable our service members to seek reproductive care. So
I don't believe the federal government
I'm not
should
hearing
be funding
answers to my questions,
travel for
Mr.
abortion.
Chairman.
I don't believe the federal.
just wanna know-
And that's hey, he's not going to get any flack on that from 98% of the people who voted for Trump, anyways. I won't lie about that.
That the other
We shouldn't be
area-
giving you paid time off to get an abortion. I don't know how I feel about that, but I will say that's not earth shattering. That's not going to be on your article or any of your 5 key takeaways from the. It's not like that's
of
pretty.
serious concern to me is President Trump saying that he wants to use the military to help with mass deportations, which will cost billions of dollars. And what that will do to readiness is very, very concerning. Mr. Hegseth, I have noticed a disturbing pattern. You previously have made a series of inflammatory statements about women in combat, LGBTQ service members,
Here this is.
Muslim
It's coming up again.
Americans, and Democrats. Since your nominations, however, you have walked those back on TV in interviews and most recently in your opening statements. You are no longer on Fox and Friends, Mr. Hegseth. If confirmed, your words, actions, and decisions will have real impacts on national security and our service members' lives. There are close to 3 million personnel in the Department of Defense, $900 billion budget. I hardly think you are prepared to do the job. Thank you, Mr.
Senator,
Chairman.
Thank you. That wasn't a question, Mr. Hegseth. Thank you,
Yeah.
Senator Hirono. Senator
She just tore him up. Shout out to Senator Mazie Hirono. Shout out to her. She had the best one for sure. American Senator. Hold on. American Senator. Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District. From 2000. Let's see. Yeah. Senator for Hawaii. Hirono. Who is United States Senator? Is it Hawaii? Sure, as a senator from Hawaii. All right, shout out to her. She had the best one, I'd say for sure.
Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Hegseth. Congratulations on your
Get out of my
nomination, and thank you.
All right. After
and
those
your
questions,
family
are
for
definitely
your
going to give him someone a little bit easier to ask questions to. But all right, that is guaranteed news. I think this guy's